Perfect. Well, thank you, Vishal. And like I said, always a pleasure to do a presentation for the Optimus team. We have a very close relationship with that team. I'm always impressed with the team as partners, which is always important. If you have a good partner in place as a customer, you have the right people in your corner, which is always critical. So every time I get to present with a top partner like Optimus is one of our top partners in the entire world, actually. I always am excited to kind of call them out and say, hey, this is a good team that is definitely going to have your best interest at heart as a customer. So again, always excited to do this. Again, our presentation today is building a data visualization practice to get the most out of your organization's data. I wanted to do something a little bit different. I'm sure some of you might have seen other JET presentations. I wanted to kind of build something a little bit more from scratch. And this is based off of a presentation I'll be giving at Summit. So anybody that's going to be attending NAVUG Summit in Orlando, I want to say October 12th. I might be wrong on the dates. But we can always fix that in edit. I'll be giving this a similar presentation to this and really wanted to talk about, what is a successful data visualization practice? Why do businesses want those practices? And, what are the tools that you can use to actually achieve that? So that being said, I should just start, and I'm just going to do a quick introduction of Jet Global Data Technologies and kind of why we're really the company to kind of walk you through this data visualization space. And so you're really going to rely on a lot of our experience. We've been in this space for 17 plus years, focusing really mostly on the dynamics market, but we work with a number of other tools. We've got over 14,000 plus customers using our tool on a daily basis to get information out of their database or databases into a place that they can actually interact with it. And for a lot of folks, that's going to be Excel. For what we're going to focus on today, we'll talk about Excel a little bit, but what we're going to focus on more kind of complex data visualization platforms like Microsoft's Power BI. That'll probably be front and center, but again, Excel is always going to have a place in the business world, and we'll show some Excel examples as well. So kind of walking through the presentation today, I want everybody to keep in mind the wide range of customers that we have. So a lot of these experiences and what I've learned about data visualization has been colored by us working with a large spectrum of different companies. You can see, obviously, we have a large variety of companies. We've got folks in manufacturing, folks in hospitality, folks in retail, folks in finance and professional services. And really, this is a testament towards sort of the flexibility of this overall data visualization approach that we'll take. The ability to pull in information from a complex system like Nav, including customizations and third-party add-ons. You can imagine, any system that is being run by a manufacturing company as opposed to a retail company is going to be different. There's going to be different customizations. There's going to be different add-ins depending on company needs. But, kind of with the approach that we're going to talk through today, all of these companies are able to have meaningful data visualization practices. The other thing I'll cover a little bit today is going to be multiple data sources. You can imagine that exact same point with all of these different companies. A manufacturing company is going to have a different technology stack than a food and beverage company. And what I mean by technology stack, I'm sure most of you probably know, but that's kind of all the applications that they're running that are powering their business. But because of the flexibility of the approach that we're going to talk about today, all these companies are able to have meaningful data visualization, meaningful analytics. And the last thing I want to point out is different sizes of the different organizations here. This approach that I'm going to outline today is going to be relevant regardless if you are a Fortune 100 company versus a small mom and pop potato farm. We've got kind of organizations that fit across both that entire spectrum that are using the same approach today. So I want to start with, what is data visualization? Probably specifically, what are data visualization tools? Really, these are going to be tools that are powerful front-end tools focused on optimizing the way that data is displayed. They're going to provide an accessible way to see and understand trends, outliers, and patterns in your data. Some examples are going to be tools like Microsoft's Power BI, Tableau, there's a tool called Click. There are a number of different data visualization tools and formats here. You can even use Excel as a data visualization tool, but you'll see when I'm talking primarily about data visualization tools, when you get more complex data visuals. So like the example that I'm showing on this screen, and I'll open up a larger example of that, where I can go in and see, where are my sales broken out through countries. That's what I'm talking about when I'm saying data visualization. And through this entire process, we'll be talking not only about that data visualization piece, so that front end piece, but the entire analytics process. Because I'll argue that it's very easy to make data look very nice, but the real value behind that is when there is a process in place that the data you're looking at is meaningful. So that's kind of the overall theme that I want everybody to be walking away with, is understanding that just because data can look nice doesn't mean it's going to be relevant. So there's a few things you're going to want to make sure that you have in place as you're going through the process. So clicking through that, I'll just give a quick example of a data visualization or a dashboard that was put together in Microsoft's Power BI. Power BI, for my money, I think is really one of the best data visualization tools out there. We have gotten a lot of investment from Microsoft to make this a nice looking tool. This specific dashboard is actually something I built out custom for the Optimist team. This is kind of a retail dashboard. And you can see, this is just kind of a good example. We've got a couple different graphs. We've got a number of different KPIs. We've got a map that is kind of breaking down our different sales based off of geography and letting me understand that information through the lens of a map. I don't need to look at information in a grid view. I'm sure folks are looking at this, and I really hope that everybody's, gears are starting to grind a little bit. You're starting to think about, what's going to be possible. If I'm looking at this as as an owner of a retail establishment, how can I use this information to better plan where I'm going to build new store locations, if I can see where our most profitable customers are. If I'm in hospitality and I can kind of see where where our patrons are coming from, how is that going to affect my marketing spend? If I can slice and dice trends and look at them broken down by different KPIs, how is that going to change my business? And these are the things I kind of want folks thinking about as we roll through this process. But before we jump into dashboards, I want to kind of cover the groundwork behind why data visualization is important, and why I think it really is ingrained with humans on a very, very base level. The first thing you'll notice is that we're going to be able to visualize relationships and patterns very quickly. You may have seen there's an old statistic around that said that people are able to comprehend and understand images 60,000 times faster than text. Unfortunately, that's not true, but the truth is still pretty compelling that humans are better at visualizing data faster than they are comprehending words. And so how that's going to be relevant is a user is going to be much quicker at understanding a graph and a data visual as opposed to looking at a standard report and trying to understand that information. You'll see the difference here. I mean, words are processed at about 200 milliseconds per word. Images, on the other hand, and this is according to an MIT study that they did back in 2014, are processed at 13 milliseconds. So a pretty substantial jump up in terms of how quickly people can process images. And the interesting part about that study, actually, I want to note it because I thought it was kind of compelling. That 13 milliseconds number, that's actually the upper limit to how quick a machine, or at least the computer that was part of this test, could display that data. So that means that people are able to comprehend information as quick as the computer can go in and provide that image. Now, I think there might be some of you that don't believe me. I want to give an example that I think is kind of relevant here. I'm hoping this kind of relates to a lot of folks. Think about how many people have been confused one day. They may be sitting in their backyard. All of a sudden, they see their hose and they think it's a snake. I will fully admit I have jumped out of my shoes in my backyard when I've moved something. All of a sudden, I've seen a hose. I've thought it was a snake. That's because of these facts here. I'm processing this so quickly. I'm reacting to it before I even know what's going on. But kind of tying to an underlying theme here, I'm reacting to that, but I'm not actually reasoning that out. So that kind of goes into, how am I actually, governing and maintaining the data that I'm bringing in? I can't just look at something and think it's going to be a snake. I want to make sure that it actually is what it is as I'm going through the process. There's another good graph that's going to illustrate that. Again, you can kind of see the subconscious bandwidth versus the conscious bandwidth in terms of how quickly people are going to understand information. Obviously, visual is going to be kind of the leading element of that, followed by kind of tactile sensation. If you switch over to the conscious bandwidth, obviously, hearing is going to make a large jump. As we're consciously thinking about information, we're able to still very quickly pick it up, but visual is still the leading indicator. So making sure that, people are able to visually integrate information means that they're going to be able to see that and bring that into their understanding. So obviously people are able to quickly comprehend stuff. Again, I want to focus on not only quickly seeing that information and seeing those trends, but actually really understanding their data. This is another kind of well-known statistic here. This is from Jerome Bruner from the New York University. And this is kind of around, what people are going to remember. People remember 10% of what they hear. They remember 20% of what they read. Remember 30% of what they see. But what's really critical is they remember 80% of what they see and do. And why I think that's critical is if you see kind of a well put together data visualization practice, as an end user, I'm able to go in and slice my data. I know this is something, Hector at Optimus is always a big proponent of, is making sure his clients can go in and slice and dice their data. I think that's because as I'm interacting with that, I'm understanding my business better, which means I'm retaining more information. And the more information I retain, the better I'm going to be at operating my business. I could just see a graph, or I can see a graph and interact with it. I'm going to retain a lot more information when I'm seeing it, I'm interacting with it, I'm getting into trends. And I don't know about you, but if I'm going to invest with a company, I'm going to always pick the company that I can invest with that I know knows their business inside and out. So this is another trend why I think data visualization is important as a whole. We'll kind of branch that out to how data visualization can help your business. First of all, improved insight. I mean, I think this is fairly clear. If I'm looking at a grid view of, let's say, different sales broken down by months and comparing that to a different graph, I'm going to be able to spot trends a lot faster if I'm looking at a graph. So fairly clear. Again, we've kind of talked about the biology that's going to underpin that, and the science that's going to underpin that. The other thing that this is really going to help do is create faster decision making. This is going to give users a single location to make a decision. An example I like to use is if you think about like a marketing analyst. If they want to go through and they want to understand where is their most effective marketing spend, they're going to kind of go in, and if they need to pull information, they might have to pull it from 20 or 30 different services. Maybe they've got Google spend, they've got Facebook spend, they've got spend from a number of different systems. They have to pull reports usually into Excel from all those different systems, put it together. They have to relate all that data. And then they're going to have to pull their sales numbers. So they have to see, okay, we knew customer came in from this, but what did they actually buy? They have to tie all that together. That all has to be done inside of Excel. And then once they finally get that information related, they're probably going to pull up a graphic interaction or a graph or something to actually see that data. So you can see that's going to take quite some time. With kind of a full data visualization and analytics practice, that person is going to have one single location. They can go in. All that information is going to be connected. It's going to have data governance, which I'm going to talk about today, and I'm really going to focus on today. So they know they're looking at the right information, and then they're going to be able to kind of slice and dice that, so they can look at that, get the most insight, and they can ask better questions, make better decisions, and drive better business outcomes all in one place. And the thing I want to leave on this before we start going into technical data visualization practice is I'll argue that the market for data visualization really supports my claim here that This is going to be a growing area. If you look at kind of some of the largest business moves or acquisitions or investment, that really supports that point. I'm sure a lot of you probably saw that Tableau, another data visualization platform, was acquired by Salesforce for, I think, just south of $16 billion. And then you'll see the same thing with Microsoft's continued investment in Power BI. Even in the last 3 years that I've been here, there's really a lot of focus around making that tool as powerful as possible. And we'll kind of talk about, why I think that is, and how you as an end user can kind of take advantage of that. So we'll look at 7 stages of visualizing data. And this is actually from a textbook called Visualizing Data. It's by a guy named Ben Fry, who I believe, he studied at MIT. I think has worked with the MIT Media Lab. This is kind of the gold standard around doing data visualization. And this is partially relevant to what's going to be covered today. The good news is that if most of the users on the call are using a Dynamics platform, a lot of these steps are already done. This is kind of a broader data visualization approach if you're taking much more raw data. But I'll kind of run through the steps, and then in the next slide I'll kind of run through what I think is already done, what I think is going to be critical, and then what, if you take kind of the approach that we talk about today, is going to be very easy for end user or end business users to do. So, we start with it. Obviously, we're going to acquire data. So we need to obtain that data from somewhere, be that a disk or over a network. We want to parse out data, so we want to make sure some data has some structure and meaning. We want to filter data, so we want to remove all but what's going to be relevant. If we want to mine data, what that means is we want to add some sort of statistics or data mining or some mathematical model behind it. And then once that data's been cleaned up, we want to start representing it. So maybe you want to start building out an initial graph or an initial visualization. You might want to refine that depending on what trends you see. And then you want to be able to interact with it. Again, going back to that point that if you want folks to understand your business, they need to be able to interact with it. They need to be able to slice and dice it. So here's the good news. If you're using a Dynamics tool or you're already using a business application, a lot of these steps are already done. If you think about steps 1, 2, and 4, that data typically already exists in your system, and I'll use Dynamics Nav as an example. You probably are already pulling information into Dynamics Nav. It's already organized in a format. Dynamics Nav is a financial database. It's an ERP system, so it's really designed to structure out your financial information. And there's already kind of an underlying mathematical trend. This is how you're running your business. In some ways, that information is already filtered out. But I started in this slide because I'm really going to argue that filtering process, that cleaning up of data, is really going to be critical in a data visualization practice. And then the last 3 slides here, represent, refine, and interact. These are going to be things that as the end user, the business, and when I say end user, I'm talking business user, they're going to be able to actually do on their own if they take the approach that we have. People can go in and build up their initial graphs. They can go in and make modifications depending on what they want to look at, and they can interact with those. And again, it'll be a very easy process. But let's focus next on that filter piece and why it's important. I'm going to use the language around data management because I think that's kind of critical in terms of making sure that you're looking at the right set of information. So why is data management important? Well, first of all, you're going to have a high volume of data. Collecting data about your business is going to be easy, and I'll argue mandatory if you want to be successful. Obviously, a high volume of data, I think that's probably pretty common knowledge at this point. I think most folks have heard the statistic, 90% of all data was created in the last 2.5 years. And that basically is because computing power has become cheaper. It's become easier for me to have more and more applications. So we're constantly creating more data. And there are hundreds of business applications that you can use to collect information about your business. And I would argue that is not only going to be an easy process, it's going to be a mandatory process because if your company isn't doing it, your competitor is. So you want to make sure that you're kind of going through and following those best practices. And the good news is everybody has access to a very good partner. Like I said, Optimus is is a good partner. They can kind of coach you through what are the most effective business applications to pull into your system and help you be successful. Now, with all of these applications, you're going to have data from different sources. You're going to have stuff from SQL. You're going to have stuff from non-SQL. You're going to have stuff from APIs. You're going to have stuff from web services, because all these applications are going to be in different formats. You know, SQL is going to be something like a relational database. Non-SQL is another database. You might have APIs into other systems. You might be pulling information from web services. But, you know, overwhelmingly, I really doubt anybody's going to have one single data source that everything is going to get pulled into without this approach, because it's all going to be stored on different databases, and different databases are optimized for different things depending on what you're looking at. The other thing to keep in mind is that that data is going to be imperfect. So it doesn't matter how clean you try to keep your data, there's always going to be little nuances there. There's always going to be imperfect information. There's a blog I'll read through, written by a guy named Randy Ayu. It's called Towards Data Science, and he works over at Google. And he listed a few reasons that data will always be imperfect. You know, you might have internal users using data for testing. You might have friends of the business using it. You might have strategic partners that have massively larger quotas and different activity. Maybe they're billed at a discount. You have reseller accounts that effectively control 50 accounts worth of activity under one account. Maybe there's even basic stuff like calendars. Maybe those will mess stuff up. So you need to make sure that you're cleansing that data, that you're attaching some logic to all of that information before you put it in. And I will argue all day that unmanaged data is worse than no data. We see it all the time. We see a lot of companies that say, hey, you know, we've got great looking dashboards, but then you start going into what's actually making up that process, and you find that they're just sort of loosely connecting data, and all of a sudden they're making major business decisions off of data that has no validity to the real world. You know, it'd be worse for them to not have any data than to try to make assumptions without a data management process in place to tie all that together, to visualize it, and to consume it. So that being said, let's kind of walk through, you know, the standard approach for data management. I like to talk about the ETL process because that's kind of what we use. We use a specific, what's called an ETL tool. ETL stands for extract, transform, and load. So extract, you want to be able to pull information from multiple data source or sources. And, you know, going back to that last point, those sources are going to be in different formats. I might have SQL data. I might have information in that I know I need to do an OLAP connection into. I want to be able to connect to as wide of a range of different data sources to pull that information in. And then once I've pulled that in, you know, kind of think about it in a loose staging database where we've got everything, but it isn't going to be relevant. So we want to clean that up. We only want to pull in the relevant data. We don't want to pull in every single element of information, because most of it is stuff we might not actually need to make decisions. It might be stuff that we need to have on file, but you know, I don't need it for a dashboard or a data visual. We also need to create relationships between the data. And this is really critical. I've got another slide that will kind of outline this additionally, but I always, you know, argue this is kind of a key component for this process. When I say relationships between the data, I mean a couple different things. First of all, even if you have one data source, this still needs to be done. If you think about, you know, if I'm just using Dynamics Nav, if I want to build out a complex report, I need to connect multiple tables and fields. So I need to have a relationship between how those different tables and fields are going to be connected, how they're going to interact. And then this is going to become even more important if I have data from multiple sources. I have to think about, you know, how does my CRM data relate to my ERP data, relate to my POS data, relate to, you know, you name it. There needs to be some sort of transformation that connects all those different systems and make sure that they're all relevant and the relation between them is clear. And once that's set up, then that information has to be loaded and deployed data out to somewhere. So you need to deploy that out to kind of the examples that we're going to use today are going to be a data warehouse and cubes. And I'll talk about what those are in the next slide. We'll run through that. So running through the ETL process again, this is really what I want folks to focus on. If I start over here in the left, this is a graphic representation of my entire technology stack. I look at this. I've got multiple tables and fields. You'll probably have over 1,300 tables, especially if you're starting with nav and then building up from there. You're going to have basically tens of thousands of fields. And everything's in a complex data format. So stuff like Dynamics Nav is in what's called a relational data source or a relational database. So that's tables and fields. And what it's optimized for is storing data. So we want to capture as much data as possible with that tool. We want to have it sitting in one place so we can get access to it. What it's not necessarily optimized for is pulling that data out. So if I need to build out, initially reports and then building out dashboards where I want to have a lot of information tied together, those aren't things that the system as a whole are really optimized for. They're data in, data out is always sort of a secondary component. And, this says sort of one single database, but this could be your entire technology stack. You could think about this top portion here is Dynamics Nav. Maybe you've got another Dynamics instance. Maybe you've got Business Central. You've also got maybe a POS and a CRM. All this data is intermarried, and it's all kind of in this format. But as we go through the ETL process, we're extracting it, we're transforming it, and we're loading it into the data warehouse. And once it's in the data warehouse, it's structured like this. Again, we've pulled in only what's relevant. We've organized that data out. We've made those relationships between those different tables and fields. And we've pulled that in regardless of what data source it is. Jet's specifically powerful that we have a partnership with a company called CData that has over 100 different data connections. So you can go in, you can connect to pretty much anything and pull that in. So once it's pulled into the data warehouse, it's much easier for the end user to focus on and work with. They don't need to understand the structure of the data. They just need to understand what they want to pull out. And then, we're going to make that even easier with using OLAP cubes. And what that'll factor in is dimensionality, which means if I want to build out a really complex example, maybe I want to look at, where are all my sales located, broken down by year, broken down by posting date, broken down with cost and profit percentage. I can do that instantly. I can tie all of that together in one place. Now, I know those of you that are still paying attention, that's a bit more of a report, but that same dimensionality where I can pull in information from a lot of different trends is going to carry over to data visualization, because I can slice and dice data based off different criteria. I can put up pretty much any breakdown of any set of information any way that I want and display it really any way that I want, which is really what's going to power a lot of the examples that we have. Another thing to note here is going to be that calculations aspect. Everyone's always going to be expecting real formal KPIs as they go through their data visualization process. Think back to that retail example that I went up and showed. I had 4 or 5 KPIs that are all put together. Those are what's called, KPIs, those are going to be key performance indicators, and those can be powered by kind of any pre-built calculation that we have, pre-calculated values. So you can actually write in those calculations right into the cubes, and the system themselves will do those calculations as you parse stuff out. So you'll be able to see that. This is also going to be very quick and accessible. That's always going to be critical as you go through and work and implement dashboards, is the fact that you can quickly get your information. You don't need to wait for anything to run. End users, we're just expecting to be able to get into that fairly quickly, to be able to slice and dice it. And for another view of that approach, you can kind of see that here. You can see I've got all my different data sources. I've got my Dynamics database, my CRM database, an old legacy database. These are all coming from SQL, but again, these could be coming from different formats depending on what you're looking at. We use an ETL tool called the Jet Data Manager, and I think this is kind of what makes us very successful, and what I would really recommend folks look at and consider if they want to have a bit more of a robust analytics tool. The reason that's important is as you're going through the ETL process, everything is going to be automated if you're actually using a formal ETL tool. I can go in, and if I want to manually code out the SQL, I can build a data warehouse by writing the right queries between all my different data sources and joining everything together. But if I'm doing that kind of in the traditional format, I'm sitting at a console, I'm writing out manual SQL queries. Those can get quite long, they can get quite tedious. With the data manager and with sort of a standard ETL tool, you're doing that in a point and click interface. So there's no writing SQL code. It's simply a matter of, I want, this to relate to this way, now send it through. And we work through the process. We go through that staging database. This is going to be where we're, cleaning up that data. So we're making sure that we're only pulling in what's relevant. We're going through that data governance process. We're tying together those relationships. And then once everything has been cleaned up, we're pushing it into the actual data warehouse. Once it's sitting there, it'll get pushed into the cubes. And then from the cubes or from the data warehouse, you can kind of deploy this anywhere that you want. Our examples are going to be, you can pull that into Excel both on your local machine or online. You can pull that into a data visualization tool like Power BI. It really doesn't matter. Again, this is all based off of our full analytics tool. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this. The one other thing that I want to note is that we're quite successful in this space because not only do we have the ability to automate the process of connecting all that data, but we've got pre-built projects. And like Vishal mentioned, we're really focused on the dynamic space. So we've got a pre-built data warehouse. We've got pre-built cubes. We even have pre-built dashboards because we take our experience in that space. We ship what pretty much most businesses are going to need out of the box. And then we tie all that information together, push it out, let users come in and kind of consume that as they want to go through the process. And if you have a pre-built project, you're getting 80% of what you need out of the box. And then that last 20%, you're using that data warehouse automation tool. And then once that's all set, you can deploy that out in Power BI, or you can deploy that into Excel. And the last point I want to note, and this is going to be kind of universal across any ETL tool, if you're looking at really any analytics approach, is you want to have a tool that you can use to easily build out the initial project, but you also need to, I want to be clear, need to be able to also modify those moving forward because your business is going to change. We already talked about, you'll probably start pulling in more business applications. You need to be able to easily integrate that information into your system. You need to be able to have logic behind that. You'll probably change how you're operating between now and 3 years from now. So you need to be able to have a system that you can easily make those modifications that reflects those changes in the business. So that being said, I know I've carried people through a number of different slides here. Let's run through a couple examples. And I'm actually going to start really simple. I'm going to start with something, it won't even be a data visualization example. We're going to start with just something out of Excel. And this is kind of that complex example that we talked about in terms of being able to quickly build out a complex report. And I will argue the ability to do this makes data visualization a very easy process for the end user to go in and do this. And when I say end user, again, I'm talking about the end business user being able to actually go in and create their own dashboards. So this is the Jet tool. Again, we're just native to Excel. We're plugged right here. The Jet ribbon is just an Excel add-in so I can get all the access that I need. And for this example, we'll use one of our pre-built cubes. I like using our sales cube because I know I've got some good information. Go into sales. And you'll see here I can scroll through this. This, again, is going to be kind of the power behind any data visualization approach. Our cubes are built up of measures and dimensions. So you want to be able to kind of go through and see all that information. Now, measures are all going to be numerical values. So if I'm looking at, stuff like sales amount, I can grab that here. I can go in and grab cost amount. I can go in and grab profit and profit percentage. And profit percentage, those aren't natively stored in Nav. Those are things that, this tool is actually going in and you're setting the calculation for that. This is our out-of-the-box process, but you could go in and change profit and profit percentage, because I'm sure, those finance folks that are on the call know that there's nothing more frustrating than being in a meeting where you spend half the time arguing about how different parties came up to the correct calculation for profit. This tool, there's one location, you tie it all together, you've got everything that you need. So again, we've got those numerical values, but right now they're just numbers sitting there. We need to give them some meaning. So we're going to pull in some examples. I'm going to pull in item category, and I'm going to pull in posting date. Again, I know this is a little more complex than what you'll typically show in a dashboard, but the fact that I can easily pull those relationships out is critical towards having a successful data visualization or dashboarding approach. And I can even, go in with our tool, add stuff as slicers. Let's actually delete this guy. Let's add that one in as a filter. So build out a really complex report. And then I can go in, depending on what I want to look at, and I can actually drill into this data. I can get into it specifically. I can get into it by specific items. I can drill into this. And again, that ability to drill into data is going to be critical as I'm trying to parse out my data visual. If I want to really get meaning from it, I want to be able to interact with it. I want to be able to actually not only see overlying trends, but dig into them to get some detail to understand my business. And the nice part about our tool is you can actually get all the way down to the transactions behind this. And this is set up so that I'll see transactions possibly across multiple systems. I think in this example, we have data from multiple data sources from Dynamics Nav and other data sources, but all those details are pulled into one location so we can easily grab what we need. Go back into our sales aspect. We can clear that up a little bit. And then if I want to slice this down a little bit more, I can start adding in some slicers. So I can go in and let's add product group. And let's go in and let's maybe go in and add another slicer for our global dimension. And we'll add in a slicer for global dimension 2. And then here we go, the first data visual of the presentation. Glad everybody waited for this. We've got our first graph. This actually isn't the best graph. This has got a lot going on. It has a data visualization best practice. Probably not ideal. The one good part here is that I am using a bar chart, which is probably the most useful of graphs. But you can see I can interact with this, and I can slice and dice data. Get that context depending on what I'm looking at, and I can isolate stuff depending on what I want to see. So it's probably pretty clear, how this can be used and created and put together into a dashboard. This is an example of one of our pre-built dashboards. This is a pre-built sales dashboard. And you can go through and see how easy it was for the team to put this together. I always take credit for this, even though I didn't do it, because I could rebuild this in seconds. I can go in, I can see sales amount, I select profit to get this, and then this one's broken down by item categories. So we basically grabbed item categories. We built out a graph based off the data that we had. We did the same thing with our large, medium, and small business. So these are our global dimensions inside of Nav. And we did the same thing broken down by sales over time. So we selected the correct graphs depending on what we're looking for. And then on this example, I can start slicing and dicing data. And like I said at the beginning, Excel can absolutely be used as a data visualization tool. You can use this as a location to go in and do this, but you're not going to get the same robust data visuals that a tool like Power BI really has put a lot of investment behind in order to making it very kind of quick and effective. So I can go in here. I can go in and get maybe my different salespeople. And I'm going to get 4 sales folks. Let's get maybe these 4. I'm on the West Coast. I'm out of Portland, Oregon. So maybe I want to say these 4 are my West Coast salespeople. I can pull them in. And I can say, all right, it looks like sales are kind of leveling off a little bit. Let's look at our different item categories. Let's look at, awards and recognition and corporate mugs. But I want to look at maybe bags and hats, or bags and totes rather. Wow. Okay. You can see I still get the value behind a data visualization tool, even if I'm using Excel, because I can see Annette's the only person selling bags and totes. And I can isolate that to a specific year and still see that trends. So again, I have one location I'm going in to make this decision, and I can go in and I can quickly find these trends about my business. Again, this is the real value behind a data visualization tool, or a data visualization practice powered by an analytics approach. Now, this is simple data visualization. Let's talk a little bit more about something like Power BI, which is going to be a data visualization tool. See here, this is a tool that's put together, is optimized for displaying data. And we'll get it from a lot of folks that people will go in and ask, well, can I just use Power BI to do data visualization? And the short answer is yeah, you can, but it is going to take some serious work. So I'm going to go in, I'm opening up a new Power BI dashboard, and I'm going to kind of show what the approach typically looks like if I'm just connecting to one data source and I want to start building out a dashboard. So you said, all right, John, build out that dashboard, but you have to go directly against Nav. Let's go ahead and do this. And let's go into Get Data. And that'll take a second while it pulls it up. Try that again. There we go. So we get data. Let's go into our SQL server. We want to go grab my Nav data. I'm going to open that up. And then I can go in. I can go see, let's just look at Jet Corp Nav. And I can see all my tables and all my fields. And if I want to start pulling that in, I need to start doing this. I can start searching for related tables. I need to start tying everything together. This goes back to that data governance piece and the need for an ETL tool. Because if I'm going in and I'm trying to build dashboards directly against the data source, I have to know my data source. I have to know where all my tables and fields sit. Typically, there's very few people in the organization that actually know that. And it's still going to take them quite some time to build out a fairly basic graph if they want to tie everything together. I have to load it. Then I have to transform it. So you can see there's a little bit of an ETL tool here. You can use it, but again, you're using a tool that is really optimized for that front-end data consumption. Now, in comparison, if I've already gone through that ETL process and I already have a pre-built data warehouse and some cubes that are ready to go, the process of building out a dashboard becomes just as easy as it was building out that complex report that I showed earlier. I just jump right in and I grab those cubes and we're going to go in and hit sales. And we can go in and kind of see all those details. And now I've got those measures and dimensions that we showed earlier. I can start building out my dashboard. And again, the nice part about Power BI is we have all those different options. So if I want to look at maybe sales by year, I can go in and do that. You can look at maybe sales by, let's look at that by sales by item category. And then, maybe I want to use a bit more of a nicer data visual. Maybe I want to use a pie chart. I can pull that in. And then let's look at, maybe I want to get sales by my salespeople. Same concept. Very easy for me to do. And I don't need to be an expert on my data. I just need to know what I want to pull out. So those last couple steps of that data visualization process that we talked about are in the hands of the end user. You can be a casual business user. You can be a finance user. You're going to be able to easily build out those dashboards, and you can be confident that the information you're looking at is relevant because it's gone through an ETL process. It's been cleaned up. It's been connected. You don't have to worry about making misassumptions based off any of your data. So, these are all pretty standard graphs. I could have done any of these in Excel. Let's talk about instead, what is the stuff that Power BI really excels at? These complex data visuals. I want to look at, okay, I want to see where our most profitable customers are. I want to see that spread out throughout the globe. This is really where a lot of the investment went into with Power BI, is these nice data visuals. Now you can see I can see all that information. I can go in, and if I want to drop, maybe some KPIs in here, I can go in and do that. Maybe I want to look at sales amount, and let's look at profit. And maybe profit percentage. I want to grab all those KPIs together. Oh, let's pull that over here so we can actually see it. And there we go. I built a dashboard. It took me 2 or 3 minutes, and I was rambling on as I did it. So you as an end user could build this out in 20, 30 seconds. And now once this is built out, this is where you're really going to use Power BI's functionality. You're going to take it out for a run. You can see here, I can slice and dice off different years. You can break a lot of these things down. You can see, okay, where are my different items being sold throughout the world, where they're profitable. See, where are our salespeople's most profitable customers, and I can kind of see where they're located. This is going to be a lot faster than me actually looking at a grid view of this information. I can see that instantly. One of the other parts I like about Power BI is the fact that I can actually drill into data. And when I say Power BI allows you to drill into that, again, it allows you to get in there, but you need to make sure you have that data model that allows for that. You can see here I can actually jump in, and I can look at those subcategories for clocks. I can look at specific item categories. And I can tie all the relationships between all this data depending on what I want to look at. So again, very quick, very effective. And this is just what ships out of the box with Power BI. It's worth noting that there are hundreds of customizations and custom dashboards that have been put together. For quite some time, our sales team actually had a fish tank dashboard that whenever one of our sales guys was at the top, they'd get the bigger fish. So there's an entire market behind this for custom and additional data visuals. So you don't have to be just limited to what's there. You can actually import that, and you can import that from the actual marketplace here. And you can see, all these different options. So I can decide anything that I really want to pull in. I've got this giant team, and it's all kind of powered by Microsoft to display my data any way that I want. And I have the relationships between that data that I don't need to worry about cleaning that or taking care of it. Simply I want to grab my aquarium. I can go in and do that. It's fairly simple. So again, this is kind of one example. So maybe run through just a couple more examples. I want to kind of show folks what else is possible. Again, this is another sales example that we have. So you can go in. I can see some of the sales breakdowns. This one's broken down by specific sales amount, numbers of customers. You can see a lot more detail here depending on what I want to look at. And let's see here, we might have a couple more. We can look at maybe an accounts payable dashboard. Same concept, we have that information instantly accessible depending on how everything is set up and what we want to see. We can go in and easily pull that together. That accounts payable dashboard's taking a second, so we'll give it a second. If not, we'll kind of pivot, and I'll show a couple other ways that data can be visualized. And let's see if that pops up. Maybe that'll take a second. So let's just carry through while we're waiting for that. Now, I want to show one other way that data can be visualized. And this is actually Jet's own data visualization tool. We have a tool called the Jet Hub. That's included in all of our software licenses. The Jet Hub kind of exists as a central destination for report management. So users can come in, they log in, they're using their same security credentials. And one of the things that we actually didn't talk about too much, but is always going to be critical for a successful reporting or analytics or dashboarding approach is making sure that your data is controlled. The nice part about our tool is that that methodology is worked in there. That's part of the data management piece. But you want to make sure that if you're creating dashboards and pushing them out to your team, that they're only going to the right people, that only the right people can see the information that's inside of those dashboards. So if we go through here, this is one of our tools, Jet Dashboard Builder. And you can see some of the functionality. Let's go back and look at the sales dashboard. And this is something we actually don't put as much investment into, but I just wanted to give an example of kind of an alternative way to visualize data. We knew as a company that Power BI was going to be a big focus for Microsoft. We knew about that fairly early, so we didn't continue a lot of investment behind the dashboard builder. But what we kind of put together is just something that we can easily go through and scroll through here. I can go in, I can tie all that together. I can get these really nice KPI tiles and I can code them out. So again, talking about quickly being able to understand my data. If I can go in, and I can see this on my phone if I wanted to size this down. It's what's called mobile responsive, so it'll size to whatever screen that we're on. And I can see all those details. And then I can scroll through this depending on what I'm looking at. Again, I jump in, I see kind of these colors here. I'm able to get a quick sense of my business. I'm able to process that really quickly. If I see that my average profit is in the red, I know that's something I need to kind of focus on and deal with fairly quickly. So the nice part about Jet is that I can kind of quickly get those details, take advantage of those, and again, I can consume this on any device. And you can do the exact same thing with Power BI as well, actually. You can go in here. I can actually see what this would look like on a phone, and I can put this together depending on how that's structured out. So I can actually say, hey, I want to look at this on a phone, and I can consume this very quickly and effectively as I want to scroll through. So I can go down. I could actually have that map right there. I could have that put in and put together. And again, that's also going to be critical towards your deployment is you want to be able to consume that where users need to see it. You want to be able to tie all of that information together and have quick access to it. So I think that's everything I have prepared. I can pause and see if anybody wants to, I don't know if we have a way to go in and submit questions, but I'm happy to go in and do that.